Have you ever been in a relationship where something just felt off, where no matter how much you gave, no matter how hard you tried, the other person remained distant, as if their heart was elsewhere? Charles and Ivanka appeared to be a normal couple from the outside. They shared a home, made plans, and worked toward a future together. But behind closed doors, their marriage was far from the picture-perfect life it seemed to be. Their days were filled with arguments, some over the smallest inconveniences, others over wounds too deep to heal. But every fight, no matter how it began, always seemed to circle back to one undeniable truth. Something was missing. Despite the conflict, Charles loved his wife. He wasn't perfect, but he was devoted. He worked tirelessly, saved diligently, and sacrificed small luxuries to build a stable future for them. His greatest dream was to buy a house together, a home where they could finally put down roots, where love and security could thrive. To him, that house wasn't just bricks and mortar, it was a promise. But to Ivanka, it was just another compromise. One evening, exhaustion weighed heavy on Charles as he walked through the front door. His mind was still tangled with deadlines, bills, and the endless responsibilities of being a provider. He had barely set his briefcase down when Ivanka asked for something he knew they couldn't afford. "Not right now," he said gently. "We're saving for the house, remember?" He expected disappointment, maybe frustration. But her reaction was something else entirely. Ivanka scoffed, rolling her eyes. "Oh, right, the house, because that's all that matters, isn't it?" Charles exhaled, forcing himself to stay calm. "It's our future, Ivanka. I thought it mattered to you, too." She let out a laugh, but there was no humor in it. "Trying? That's what you call this? You're doing the bare minimum, Charles, and you expect me to be grateful." The words hit like a slap. Bare minimum. A bitter taste settled in his mouth. He wanted to remind her of the long hours, the weekends he gave up, the careful planning, the sacrifices. But what was the point? No matter what he did, it would never be enough. And then, for the first time, he saw it. The way she looked at him, not with love, but with resentment. The way her affection had always felt forced. The way she spoke, not as a wife, but as if he were an obstacle in the way of the life she truly wanted. It wasn't about money. It never was. His patience snapped. Without another word, he grabbed his keys and walked out. He needed air. He needed space. He needed something, anything, but the suffocating weight of never being enough. He had barely made it down the street when he realized his mistake. His wallet and bank card were still sitting on the kitchen counter. Annoyed, but knowing he had no choice, he turned back, moving quietly as he pushed open the door, not wanting to start another fight. He just needed to grab his things and leave before she even noticed. But then he heard her voice. At first, he wasn't paying attention. She was on the phone, her tone casual, almost bored. But then, "I settled for less." His body froze. "I should have been with Dean, but I needed stability." A chill ran down his spine. Charles is a good man, but not the one I truly wanted. His heartbeat thundered in his ears. It was as if the air had been sucked from the room. She had never truly loved him, not the way he had loved her, not the way he had fought for their marriage. Everything made sense now. The forced affection, the constant dissatisfaction, the way she treated him like a backup plan instead of a partner. She hadn't built a life with him out of love. She had settled for him out of convenience. 4 years, he had held on, convincing himself their struggles were just part of marriage, that they would pass, that love was something you fought for. But the truth was, there had never been a they. There had only ever been him, trying. Silently, he picked up his wallet. Careful not to make a sound, he walked out, shutting the door behind him as quietly as he had entered. The night air was cool against his skin, but it did nothing to numb the sharp, hollow ache in his chest. He didn't know where he was going. His feet just carried him forward, one step after another, until he found himself in a small, dimly lit bar he had never been to before. He slid onto a stool, ordered a drink, and stared at the amber liquid in his glass, lost in thought. Ivanka had never loved him. She had settled, and in doing so, she had unknowingly trapped him in a marriage built on obligation rather than devotion. For a long time, he sat there, considering his options. He could confront her, demand an explanation, force her to admit the truth. But what would that change? She might apologize. She might even cry. But it wouldn't erase the fact that she had never truly wanted him. And for the first time, Charles saw a way out. Not just for the night. Not just a cool-off. But for good. A quiet, final decision settled deep within him. With slow, deliberate movements, he pulled out his phone and opened their joint bank account. They had been saving for the house, a house he had worked tirelessly for, a house that, as of tonight, he no longer needed. He transferred his portion of the savings, 80%, the amount he had single-handedly contributed. But instead of withdrawing cash, he moved the funds strategically, purchasing high-value electronics and rare collectibles, things he could resell later. He left nothing to chance. Once the transactions were complete, he erased every trace of them from his email. Ivanka wouldn't be able to track his next moves. Then, with quiet efficiency, he packed only the essentials. Important documents. Enough clothes to last. Anything he might need to rebuild elsewhere. No sentimental items. No reminders of a life that had never truly belonged to him. Before he left, he sat down at the desk, staring at a blank sheet of paper. He didn't need many words. The truth had already been spoken, just not to his face. He picked up a pen and, with a steady hand, wrote, "I overheard everything. I won't stand in the way of your happiness. Go settle with your ideal partner." No anger, no accusations, just the quiet finality of a man who had nothing left to give. By morning, Charles was gone. Ivanka stretched lazily as sunlight poured through the curtains, reaching for her phone. She half expected a message from Charles, an apology, a desperate attempt to smooth things over after last night's fight. But there was nothing. She frowned, rubbing the sleep from her eyes. That's when she noticed it, the single piece of paper sitting on the kitchen table. Her fingers trembled as she picked it up. At first, the words didn't register. Then they did. Her stomach dropped. She reached for her phone before she even realized what she was doing. The moment her fingers wrapped around it, she was already dialing his number. It rang once, twice, then the call disconnected. Her heart pounded as she tried again, scrolling frantically through her contacts, desperate to hear his voice. Nothing. She switched to email, her fingers trembling as she typed out a short, urgent message. "Charles, please, let's talk." She hit send. Undelivered. A cold dread curled in her stomach. She tried social media, searching for his profile, but it was gone, as if he had never existed, as if he had been erased from her world overnight. Panic surged through her veins. Maybe he had just gone to work. Maybe he needed space. Maybe this wasn't as final as it seemed. Clutching the phone, she called his office, forcing calm into her voice as she asked for him. A pause, a shuffle on the other end. Then the response came, casual, indifferent. "Oh, Charles?" He resigned this morning. Sent an email before office hours. Effective immediately. Her grip on the phone tightened. He had planned this. This wasn't an impulsive reaction to a fight. This was deliberate, thoughtful, precise. He had taken the time to remove himself from her life completely. No second chances. No final words. No room for regret. He was gone. At first, Ivanka tried to convince herself it was for the best. No more tension. No more feeling trapped. No more pretending. She was free. Free to be with the man she had truly wanted all along. Free to be with Dean. And at first, it felt like everything had fallen into place. Dean told her all the right things. Made her feel wanted, cherished, like she had broken free from a life that had suffocated her. He whispered assurances in her ear, kissed her like she was the most important thing in the world, told her this was how it was supposed to be. She believed him. She convinced herself that Charles leaving was a gift, a blessing in disguise, that she had been given a fresh start, a second chance at happiness. She threw herself into her new life with reckless abandon, desperate to prove, to herself, to Dean, to the world, that she had made the right choice, that she hadn't walked away from a man who loved her for nothing. A few months later, she made it official. She filed for divorce. Since Charles had disappeared, the court issued a default judgment in her favor. Just like that, she was single. Just like that, she was free. Or so she thought. At first, life with Dean was everything she had dreamed. No more fights about money. No more resentment lingering in the air. No more husband to answer to. She told herself she had finally done the right thing. She told herself she had won. But then the cracks began to show. Dean was charming. Too charming. The words that had once made her feel intoxicated, his endless praise, his affectionate gestures, began to feel rehearsed. Hello. He was present, but not in the way that mattered. His phone was always lighting up with messages. His attention was always somewhere else, his eyes drifting over her shoulder when they were in a crowded room. She told herself she was imagining things. But then came the whispers, the lingering glances toward other women, the sudden changes in his schedule, the late-night text that he dismissed with a chuckle and a careless, "Don't be paranoid." She denied it at first. She told herself he was just busy, that he loved her, that he had chosen her. But deep down, she knew she wasn't his priority. She wasn't special. She wasn't the one. She had left a man who gave her everything for a man who had never intended to give her anything at all. And then, the words that shattered her. One night, in the middle of yet another fight, she had demanded answers. What are we doing? Dean? What's next? Are we building something together, or am I just wasting my time? Dean had sighed, exasperated, barely looking up from his phone. Why are you in such a rush? She pressed further, voice rising. Because I left my husband for you. I gave up everything for this. And then, Dean looked at her, expression unreadable, voice calm, casual, unaffected, and said, I never asked you to leave your husband. The words cut through her like a blade. The world tilted. She had done it all on her own. Abandoned a life, a man, a marriage, chased after a fantasy, built a future on nothing but a feeling, never stopping to ask if Dean had ever wanted the same. He hadn't, and he never would. Years passed. Dean moved on, quickly, easily, as if she had been nothing more than a fleeting moment in his long list of romances. Ivanka? She was still alone, and the silence of her empty apartment, of her empty bed, became unbearable. She never stopped wondering. Where was Charles now? Had he moved on? Was he happy? Did he ever think about her the way she thought about him now? She would never know. But deep down, she understood the truth. He was gone, and he was never coming back. Life is a way of teaching lessons when we least expect it. Some come as whispers, gentle reminders. Others hit like a door slamming shut, final and irreversible. Ivanka learned her lesson too late. She had a man who loved her, a man who sacrificed for her, a man who was willing to build a future with her. And she threw it all away for an illusion. She had spent so long chasing what she thought she wanted that she never stopped to appreciate what she had. Charles had fought for her, but love should never feel like an obligation. And so, when he realized he was the only one fighting, he stopped, and he left. Some losses are temporary. Some can be repaired. But some are permanent. Because sometimes, when a person walks away, they don't look back. And sometimes, the worst punishment isn't losing them. It's knowing they never needed you in the first place.